Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As you heard, RCMP in Kelowna have just issued an update on the closure of the Bennett Bridge, still closed for now. We'll bring you the latest on that coming up at 12:30. Up first, Premier David Eby is suggesting banning the import of U.S. alcohol as a way to fight back against Donald Trump's potential tariffs. Are you avoiding American wine and liquor? Plus, is renting really throwing away your money, or could it actually be better for you financially? We'll have that discussion in half an hour. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Well, BC's food and alcohol sector has mixed reactions to provincial and federal government plans to retaliate against the tariff threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. Here in BC, Premier David Eby has suggested banning the import of alcohol from south of the border. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is doing the same. Ian Tostenson is president of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association.
We sell about 1 million bottles of California wine annually, and which is just about 13 or 14% of the total amount of wine that's sold to restaurants in British Columbia. Now, that's actually the second largest category after British Columbia. So it's a substantial, it would be a substantial hit to us. Would it be a game changer? And no, but I think, I think people like California wines. They enjoy California wines. They're classic. But if there was a trade war, then we'll have to shift. We would probably shift to, obviously France, Italy would be the most logical ones. But, the problem is they take longer to get here. They're sometimes a bit more costly because of the transportation. So
that's Ian Tostenson, president of the BC Restaurant and Food Services Association. Well, what does this mean for BC's wine industry? We're going to hear from a winery owner from the Okanagan in just a moment. And we're asking you, are you going to avoid U.S. wine and liquor? Are you going to buy BC instead? And what do you think of this potential U.S. wine ban or liquor ban as retaliation for potential tariffs? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Could you see customers turning away from U.S. alcohol? Well, joining us now is Tony Holler. He's owner of Poplar Grove Winery in Penticton. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Thank you for joining us, Tony. What would be the impact of not importing U.S. wines here in BC?
Well, I think what would happen is that restaurants, et cetera, would import wines from other regions. In terms of BC wines, we've always enjoyed a lot of support from BC consumers. And I think that would continue. And I actually think it would grow stronger. So people would be more and more supportive of our industry.
And what about exports outside BC? Is there a large portion of BC wine that is sent down south?
There isn't. A good example is Poplar Grove, and we're a medium-sized winery, and we sell a few pallets of wine in the U.S. So it would have no significant effect on us if the U.S. had tariffs on BC wine.
And so would a 25% tariff actually affect BC's wine industry?
I don't think it would. I'm just trying to think of the wineries that, and I know them pretty well, that sell significant quantities of BC wine to the U.S. None come to mind.
So this is not something that's making you nervous, but it sounds like you're perhaps even looking at a potential growth for BC wines in light of a ban that may happen.
Yes. And the only thing that really worries me, Michelle, is if we got into a trade war. Now you create consumer uncertainty. Now you lose jobs. Now people worry about, buying the basics. All of a sudden, wine doesn't fit into that.
Okay.
So that is my real concern. Is these both countries starting to throw tariffs around?
I'll ask you to repeat that because we just cut out a little bit. What do you think would be the impact then on your customers should the trade war take place between the U.S. and Canada?
I think they would be worried about their jobs. They would be worried about their income, and that could dramatically affect wine sales for BC wineries with our group of consumers. I think it's a real problem.
What do you think of this sort of tough talk coming from David Eby then saying, if they're not going to respect our trade agreements, then we're not going to either. And we're just going to say we're not going to import U.S. liquor. What do you make of that kind of approach?
Well, everything that I've read about this idea that we'll just, put tariffs on everything they send to us, it sounds like we would be the net losers in that. So I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of that.
No, can you tell me a bit more about that? Why you're not a big fan? What do you think is the impact of that tone?
Well, just because, they're a big trading partner of ours. We send a lot of goods to the U.S. And if we start, having tariffs on all U.S. goods, I just think, and vice versa, then I just think the economy in Canada is going to take a dramatic hit, which will lead to job loss, which will lead to consumer uncertainty, and all of a sudden that's going to affect the wine industry. We're not like milk and bread and things like that. We're a consumable that is kind of not a must-have.
Not a must-have. So it's sort of a luxury item.
It's a luxury. Exactly.
Yeah. Let me just take some calls here. My guest is Tony Holler, who's owner of Poplar Grove Winery in Penticton. So you heard there in his hope that should there be this ban on U.S. liquor and importing U.S. liquor into Canada, that might be an opportunity for BC wines. At the same time, what is the impact on the consumer having a trade war take place and the uncertainty that would ensue from that? So we're asking you, what do you make of this proposal from Premier David Eby, the suggestion of a ban on U.S. wine and liquor as retaliation for potential tariffs from President Donald Trump? Are you going to avoid U.S. alcohol? Are you thinking about buying BC? Is that becoming a focus for you right now? Call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Janet writes, not a problem to ban U.S. wine. Support BC wines. Thank you, Janet. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email. And Thomas is on the line in Vancouver. Hi, Thomas.
Hey there. Just want to say, yeah, absolutely. I'm down for anything. I've already started switching vendors and looking for alternatives for any of my U.S. vendor suppliers, anything like that. I'd also like to add this one thing, and this is specifically for our American friends and possibly Albertans, one and the same. A tariff, let's call it what it is. It is a federal sales tax. So people who think they're like, oh, this is like a tariff on Canada. It's a penalty against Canada. It's not, because the end user is the American buyer.
Right.
That's the one who ultimately pays this. And I hate this tariff just shields the truth about what it actually is. It doesn't hurt Canada. It doesn't hurt me as a manufacturer. It really doesn't. I have one less customer. I'll find some others.
Is it that easy? Is it that easy to find other customers, though?
Pivot. We've survived much harder. The COVID was much harder to get through than any, this Trump, whatever administration this is you want to call it. I'm ready to fight this guy. COVID you couldn't fight. This guy you can. Stand up to this punk.
Thomas, it sounds like you're a business person. Can I just clarify that? You're in business and you were talking about choosing different vendors.
I am indeed. I'm a Canadian manufacturer. I run 3 musical instrument companies, and I export to the USA.
Okay, so have you? Can you tell me a little bit more about the decisions you're making in terms of people you're dealing or companies that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the fault of. I feel bad because, it's an economics of scale. It's not just like auto manufacturers that are integrated with the United States. I'm closely tied, and I love my American friends and my American vendors that I buy for. But this goes beyond that. That's bigger than this in my mind. This is a war. Everybody's like, oh, Donald Trump has never started a war. Well, actually, he has. This is his first one, and I'm prepared to fight back. I don't like him. I will sacrifice whatever it takes to stand up to this guy. I don't care what it is.
Thomas,
I don't care if I have to be a Walmart greeter and close my company and shutter it until this guy's gone. I'll do whatever it takes.
okay, Thomas, thank you so much for the call. That's Thomas in Vancouver. Okay, so he's saying he's even going beyond, right? Beyond liquor and just saying, yeah, I'm even as a business person, I'm changing how I do business. Thanks for the call. Naomi is on the line in Souk. Hi, Naomi.
Hi there.
Thanks for calling in. What do you make of this idea of banning U.S. liquor?
Yeah, I was just curious. I've heard some commentary about differentiating between red and blue states,
Right.
and I wonder if there's any value in being intentional about what we ban and acknowledging that California is obviously a major exporter and actually supports some of the red states. So just that question, like being intentional around which states we ban liquor from.
I see. Yeah, Naomi, thank you very much for the call. Tony, I don't know how much you can say about that, in terms of the impact it would have on any kind of diplomatic relations or a trade war. But she's saying there, blue states, red states, focusing perhaps not on products from blue states like California. Any thoughts on that?
I just think that would be incredibly complicated to figure out. So that, I don't have any further comment because
Sure.
I understand what she's saying, but I don't know how you'd actually do that.
Naomi, thank you so much for the call. I'm sure we had a guest from Washington State last week, so I'm sure you might have some thoughts about that. Rick is calling from the Comox Valley. Hi there, Rick. What are your thoughts? Are you trying to avoid U.S. Wine and liquor now?
Well, absolutely. Actually, during Trump 1.0, when he was threatening to tear up NAFTA, my wife and I already started steering away from all American products, food and other products as well. And we're doing it again. Like, we look at the labels in the grocery stores. We pick Chilean, Mexican, European, Canadian, and steer away from American. As regards to liquor, I am in favor of banning, especially targeting those states, those red states. So banning the bourbon, the whiskey, the rye, but maybe going easy on the California wines and holding that in reserve.
Okay, Rick, thanks so much for the call. And Dennis is calling from Victoria now. Your thoughts on U.S. wine and liquor? Hi, Dennis.
Hi there. Just in a nutshell, I think it's high time that we as Canadians stood up as Canadians for each other. This is outrageous what's happening. He's put a gun to Canada's head, and by and large, when people pull out the gun, the police come in and deal with them. This is absolute blackmail. Trump is prepared, apparently, to do anything that pops into his very simple little mind. He doesn't understand the overall economics of what a move like this would result in. And not only in Canada, he's forgetting about the United States. Wouldn't it be something if we put tariffs on American products at the same time? We're going to have chaos. Come on, folks. Somebody has to stand up, be a big boy. And
is that what you think is that what's happening when it comes to we're going to possibly ban U.S. Products or U.S. Alcohol products? Is that something that you think is standing up
Well, I think that's one of the things. I think I will ban all American products that we currently purchase, whether it's clothing or T-shirts or whatever.
Okay.
I'm so offended by the vulgarity and just the complete insensitivity to the world. The world's in a tough shape, and we all need to stand up for it.
Okay. Dennis, thank you very much. And it sounds like your disagreement or disdain goes beyond the tariff threat as well. Let me ask you, Tony, about how interconnected the industries are now. You laid out, how much you don't rely, in fact, on American customers. But last year, when we had that devastating cold snap that really affected our wineries here in BC, the grape buds were destroyed. Some BC wineries, like Poplar Grove, started importing grapes from Washington vineyards. Are there those relationships, and how would those be impacted then?
Yeah, we're talking about that right now because, as you know, last year was devastating, but it wasn't just a one-year phenomena because about a third of vineyards got pulled out. Then vineyards also were badly damaged. So we're estimating this year, even though we've had a wonderful winter so far, that our production will probably only be about 60% of normal. So, having the Washington state farmers who we've developed these great relationships with is critically important. And, the idea that we'd have to pay 25% tariff on bringing in Washington state grapes, I mean, all of a sudden you take all the money out of the equation. And again, the BC wine industry, which has been smacked around over the last couple of years, that would be another blow.
And so you're saying 60% of capacity right now. Would the wine industry here have the capacity to make up the gap should those American wines not be coming up here?
There's no way. There's no possible way. We would be basically, somewhere, 40% less production. With 40% less production in an industry that's already on its heels, it would be a disaster.
So that's a lot of uncertainty still coming from different sides and for you.
Exactly. And, last year, BC wineries established these wonderful relationships with our neighbors in Washington state. And, this tariff stuff could really dismantle that.
Let's take some more calls now. Asking you, what do you think U.S. wine and alcohol and liquor product ban would mean for BC? What are your thoughts on that as retaliation for potential tariffs from the United States? Are you focusing on BC products only? And are you avoiding U.S. wine and liquor already? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. A couple more minutes here to take your calls. Carrie is on the line in Surrey. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Carrie. Are you there? Okay, I think we've lost Carrie. John is in Victoria. Hi, John. Okay, John, I don't hear you. Let's go to Devo in East Vancouver. Hi, Devo. We might be having some trouble with our phone lines here. Okay, let's give it a couple of minutes to see if we can fix that. My apologies to John, Devo, and Carrie. We have an email from Joanne who writes, BC and Canada should have prepared in November to react to this threat of tariffs. Now it appears it may be a reality. Every single Canadian should be on board by buying Canadian first. The government needs to negotiate with businesses in Canada to create a Canada, BC, Alberta, etc. first. And this could involve massive support by Canadian owned news outlets. The government could create stickers to be put on all products made in Canada. Okay, I think we might have Devo now in East Vancouver. Hi, Devo.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can now. Thanks so much. What are your thoughts on this potential ban that BC's promoting or suggesting?
Well, I'm a bioregionalist to begin with, but I do believe that we should be buying our products as local as possible. But something that showed me in the last provincial election and the last federal election in the United States is that we should be building alliances with Washington, Oregon, and California, because Governor Ferguson from Washington, Governor Kotek from Oregon, and Governor Newsom from California, they don't like Trump either. So our alliances should be built with California. And if we can do something to create more of a unity between those three states and BC, we'd be far better off. But as far as buying products, yes, local should be first. But again, we should be building our alliances with the three West Coast states.
Devo, thanks so much. Glad we got you on. Tony, you said you were already talking with your fellow winery owners about how to plan, perhaps, for a need for more BC wine. What are you watching right now?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to make a comment. Your last caller made an important point that sort of twigged in my mind. One of the problems we have in Canada is we restrict the flow of goods from province to province. Maybe this will be a stimulus for our provincial governments to get rid of these artificial tariffs that we have right here in Canada. It just seems, we're talking about the Americans, and we do have the same system operating in Canada.
It's interesting, Tony, I do have to end it there, but that has been something that the premiers have brought up as well, is looking for more inter-provincial trade as a way to diversify in the face of these potential tariffs. Thank you so much. Really good to speak with you.
Thank you, Michelle. All the best.
And to you, Tony Holler, owner of Poplar Grove Winery in Penticton. Now, we've heard from a number of industry leaders about how a ban on U.S. alcohol imports would come about. Some have brought up logistical issues like pricing and transportation costs of shifting to other markets. Others, though, seeing it as an opportunity to showcase BC wines.
If you stop or slow down American spirits or wine coming in, you force British Columbians to look at the wealth of what they have in their own backyard. And often I think we're so overwhelmed by the noise, by just how much volume is in these government liquor stores. And to be honest, it takes away from the brilliance of what we have right here. As a BC taxpayer, and from someone who works within the industry, I'm actually quite disappointed of what our government, our taxpayer dollar liquor stores, how much they support multinationals over made in BC.
That was Tyler Dick, the president of the Craft Distillers of BC. We welcome more of your thoughts on this topic. What do you think of a potential ban on U.S. liquor and alcohol product imports as a way of retaliating against potential tariffs? Our email address, bctoday@cbc.ca. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well on our streaming service and on YouTube at CBC British Columbia. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to be with you this Monday afternoon. Thanks so much for being with us. And coming up in just a few minutes from now, we'll bring you more from the Kelowna RCMP and their latest update on what caused that closure, the police incident that caused that closure of the William R. Bennett Bridge. Of course, it's the main bridge connecting West Kelowna and Kelowna, really caused gridlock this morning. It remains closed, and we'll get the latest from our reporter in Kelowna, Brady Strachan, coming up in just a couple of minutes from now. And we'll ask you as well on the topic of home ownership. Is it all it's cut out to be? There's more of an argument now for renting as something that's a good financial plan for the long term. So we'll ask you if that's something that you've considered as well. And we'll talk to a financial author coming up in a few minutes from now. Right now, it's 12:31, time for a CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The man who killed his two daughters in Oak Bay on Christmas Day in 2017 has had his appeal of parole eligibility denied by the BC Court of Appeal. Andrew Barry was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 22 years. He appealed the parole eligibility period, arguing the judge didn't consider jury recommendations in the case. The Bennett Bridge in Kelowna remains closed as police wait for the explosives disposal unit to deal with a van that has been parked for several hours. RCMP say a person in distress drove the panel van onto the bridge and started a fire inside it at around 3:45 this morning. The man has been taken into custody. And the federal government has committed more than $660 million for Metro Vancouver transit over the next 10 years. Energy and Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson says the money will come from the Canada Public Transit Fund. The funding is set to begin next year. TransLink has indicated it is facing an operational funding gap of about $600 million per year. And now the forecast on the north coast, cloudy this afternoon with a high of 3, highs around 7 and mainly cloudy with strong winds in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly sunny with a high of -5, highs around -2 with lots of sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, clearing this afternoon with a high of -1. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, sunny with highs around 6 degrees. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And more now on that bridge, the closure of the Bennett Bridge in Kelowna. In the last hour, Kelowna RCMP have just held a news conference on the incident that led to that closure. It's been hours long now. And the William R. Bennett Bridge, if you don't know, it's the main bridge that connects Kelowna and West Kelowna. And so there was real gridlock today. If you had to reroute, it would take you quite a long time. The CBC's Brady Strachan joins me now from Kelowna, and he's on the line now. Hi there, Brady.
Hi, Michelle.
Can I ask you exactly where you are? I see a stretch of road behind you that looks like it is closed.
That's right. This is the Highway 97, and we're at the point where they're stopping traffic and directing anyone that wants to continue on north. They're directing them on this overpass here, and then drivers would have to take this windy road up the west side of Okanagan Lake, and that would get you to Vernon. And if you're, continuing into the interior, you could carry on that way. But if you want to come back to Kelowna, it's another hour back. So to get to Kelowna here, it's a 2-hour, maybe 2-hour plus detour here because of everything that's happened on the bridge this morning.
Yeah, I know that West Side Road, and it is it's narrow, it's windy, not a lot of capacity there either. So I can understand just what kind of delay that means. So tell us exactly what happened this morning. What do we know?
Well, police say at about 3:45 in the morning, there was a report that a driver had parked a van blocking off one of the lanes on the bridge, and that this person had been making threatening comments and messages and was threatening that they had some sort of explosives on the van. Police say they went and attended and were able to get the individual out of the van and apprehended them and took them to hospital. But on inspection of the van and from the alleged threats that the individual made, they believe that there may be explosives or dangerous materials on that van on the bridge. Thus, they closed off the highway in both directions and called in the RCMP bomb disposal unit. And so since then, there's been no traffic at all allowed to go across the bridge, and that has created a lot of challenges for commuters like myself. We live on the west side, and anyone that lives in Kelowna that wants to come over to West Kelowna as well. So we're used to dealing with accidents and collisions which delay traffic on the bridge, but at the time I've been here, there's never been something like this, or the bridge has been closed for multiple hours like this. And Michelle, there's also a very long kind of manifesto on Facebook that someone has posted alleging to be this driver here with all sorts of complaints against many individuals, including the RCMP. We're not sure if that is the same individual that was taken in, that was apprehended or not, but it is a long kind of rambling manifesto there that provides a story, I guess. Yeah, and so many people are looking at that as we try to figure out, as we wait and see when the bomb disposal unit might come and remove that vehicle and allow traffic to continue through.
And so, what is the latest from the RCMP on that thread on Facebook and any other details that they have provided?
Yeah, you mentioned the press conference they held an hour ago. There, they said that the bomb disposal unit hadn't arrived yet, that it could be several hours yet. So we don't know if the bridge will be open for, I guess, the rush hour traffic. We don't know how long it will take, and even when the bomb disposal unit arrives, how long their activities will take until they're able to clear things off. We do know that there are measures in place to get some people across the bridge without having to take that 2-hour detour. Anyone that works at the hospital, according to police, has been able to go across on a boat. It's not that far a boat ride across the lake, just a couple kilometers. And along with the fire department, they've been taking doctors and nurses and people that work at the hospital from one side to the other. And they also say that they may be able to allow ambulances across the bridge, and there's also a helicopter ambulance that can take passengers in critical situations. So there are ways of getting over there in a quicker way for emergencies or essential health workers.
And Brady, I'm sure they'll be talking to different people throughout the day, but might this be renewing calls for those alternate routes through the central Okanagan to bypass this kind of impact?
Certainly, those conversations are coming up online, and it's something that we've heard here, and many people have been calling for in the Kelowna area. Actually, former Premier Christy Clark, when she was elected, one of her first promises was to make a second crossing of the bridge, and there were studies on that, but it hasn't been advanced. And in fact, most recently, the Ministry of Transportation has come out and said that they're not pursuing that at this point. This was a election promise by the BC Conservative Party that they would create a second crossing on the bridge. And this always does come up every now and then when an incident like this happens. And as you know, more and more people have moved to the central Okanagan in recent years, and traffic has built up there. And then incidents like this that block off the bridge completely, well, yeah, that makes it a very tough job to get from one side of Kelowna to the other.
Brady, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
That's the CBC's Brady Strachan reporting from Kelowna. It's 12:39 now. Well, an update on another story, or your reaction to a story we brought you last week. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim says there are too many housing and addiction supports concentrated in the downtown east side. He announced a plan last week at a Save Our Streets Coalition forum, and that includes a pause on the construction of any new supportive housing and what he called a crackdown on gang activity in the downtown east side. Well, he got these emails. Jan writes, victim blaming is the modus operandi of the wealthy and those that politically lean to the right. Your guest explained quite clearly what services and housing is needed to help solve the problem with homelessness. Nothing will change unless we voters elect governments that put people before profits. It's time to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Anna writes, I agree with your guest that most of our problems are due to poverty. We are not equal. I agree there are many millionaires living in Canada, along with many poor people. The minimum for all Canadians should be to have the basics covered. Food, a place to live, a job, and a sense of pride from feeling that we are part of the community. Blair writes with a suggestion: by recruiting eligible participants and employees from the downtown east side who are capable with minimal instruction to participate in rebuilding what he calls ghost towns of BC as tourist destinations, tourists would be able to experience a remote or inaccessible location, and it'd be an opportunity for participants to kick their addictions with healthcare workers on hand, learn a new trade, and build for themselves their new home, a new community, and a new life. Thank you very much for all of your thoughts. We always take them BC Today at cbc.ca. Well, whether it's coming from your parents or your peers, there's the general notion that home ownership is the road to financial stability and financial freedom. But there have been more voices who are saying that for some, the math of home ownership isn't mathing and that perhaps renting can be a better option. So is renting becoming a good and better financial option than home ownership? Have you decided to rent long-term versus buy a home, or is home ownership still the goal for you? Our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And my guest is Jessica Moorhouse, the author of Everything But the Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. It's published by HarperCollins Canada. And she's the host of the More Money podcast. Hi, Jessica. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
I understand this is one of your favorite topics.
Oh, I love talking about housing and renting. I love it.
What are the upsides of renting then? Lay it out for me.
Well, I'd say one big upside is flexibility. You can move whenever you like. If you get a job opportunity across the country or in another country, all you have to do is give some notice to your landlord, pack up your stuff, and you're good. If you owned your home or you're a condo, well, you have to either sell that, residence, or you have to find a renter to fill it in. It's a lot more complicated. So you do have a lot more flexibility and freedom as a renter. And as I know, some stats have been coming out, rents are falling. And so I'd say when we do actually look at the numbers, it is probably much cheaper, depending on where we're looking at, to rent as opposed to own.
What are the costs associated with home ownership that people perhaps, don't talk about?
Oh, how long do you have? As a homeowner, the costs just keep coming and surprising you. So I think most people often think of the down payment and the mortgage payments. That is the tip of the iceberg. There is the property taxes, there's utilities, there is maintenance. I have to get a new fence next summer. Like the roof, that everything always breaks down right when you think you have your whole financial situation covered. Something breaks down that you have to replace. And there's no landlord to call for them to pick up the bill as you would do as a renter. You are responsible for everything. So when I talk to people, I say when you're crafting your budget and you want to buy a home or you do own your home, the responsible thing to do is to have a special home emergency fund. Because, this is my second property that I've lived in. And the first place I lived in, everything broke down in the first 2 years. It was very expensive. I think in the 5 years I lived there, we probably spent $30,000 to $40,000 on just, fixing things.
Let me put to you then, before I go to our caller here, Dennis, let me put to you then the argument that, okay, so yes, you might be flexible and can move anytime. You could also be evicted anytime. So that there's the lack of stability perhaps. And also, what you hear, which is where does your rent actually go? You're paying someone else's mortgage. So what do you say to those arguments?
Yeah, those are fair arguments. And, that's, I think, a big reason why a lot of people do crave home ownership, that stability. But again, if you don't pay your mortgage, the bank owns your home. So there's also some instability there. But there's a lot about, there's a great book I suggest everyone to read called The Wealthy Renter, which is a really great argument for, how renting can be a great way to, have that freedom, but also to build wealth. And I think the old, kind of argument that you're throwing your money away with rent, whereas you could be building equity, buying a home, it was kind of under the assumption that you were just investing in that home. And we saw that a lot, or continue to see this a lot with the older generations, especially baby boomers. They put everything into their home and they don't have too much maybe in their TFSA, their RRSP. Whereas when you're a renter and maybe you're spending less because your costs are lower and you have that flexibility, guess what? You have a lot of extra cash flow, hopefully, that you can put towards your investments that, isn't locked into a home. And, the other thing too is we're seeing a lot of older people retire and their home is their retirement. And the only real way to liquidate that money, to get access to that investment, is to sell or to maybe do something like a reverse mortgage. And most people don't want to leave the home they've been in for many years. That's their home. They want to stay.
Okay, my guest is Jessica Moorhouse, author of Everything But the Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. And that's published by HarperCollins Canada. She also hosts the podcast More Money. So we're asking you, do you want to weigh in? Let us know. Have you decided that you want to rent long term and that it is a better financial option for you? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Is this generational perhaps as well? I'd love to ask my guest that in a moment, but is that something that you're seeing along generational lines? Would love to hear from you. Dennis is on the line in East Van. Hi, Dennis.
Hi there.
Hi, you're a renter yourself.
Yes, I'm a renter. I'm just moving to a new place in a couple days, a new rental. I made that decision too to be a long-term renter, primarily because the cost that the guest mentioned, and one thing, especially for the condos that I'd be looking at, that people don't talk about too, are special assessments, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that come up on you if you don't pay attention. That throw everything for a loop.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons that, and obviously the high housing costs and rents have decreased a bit recently. So I'm excited about that, and that's why we're moving and getting a huge decrease in rent. And about renting versus buying, and one of the things that cemented my decision really was I was listening to a financial podcast about renting versus buying actually, and they mentioned how rent and buying can pretty much be even in the long term, as long as in most Canadian cities, as long as you buy a diversified portfolio that's really low in fees. And over time, you'll have more flexibility that way with your investment, like TFSAs and RSPs, to use that in the long term. Yeah.
Really interesting, and that's the route that you're going then as well, is looking at what to do with what you're saving and where to invest that money.
Yeah, exactly. Because buying a house sounds nice, and obviously it'd be nice to have a condo or something like that. But if I can rent for cheaper, like if I'm paying, especially in the new purpose-built rentals in Vancouver that are popping up everywhere, or the company-owned rentals where a company can have a son appear out of nowhere to evict me, right? So that is really nice to be finding a lot of housing that way.
Dennis, great to hear from you. There's that intersection as well of the policies that we're seeing and what impact that is having on rents potentially. Tom is on the line now in Kelowna. Hi, Tom. What are your thoughts on renting versus owning a home?
I think renting is great for young people right now, just due to the fact that, a lot of people can't afford to own a home. But I think in the long term, I'm a 21-year-old and I'm doing a rent-to-own situation versus just renting, which I think is a good alternative for young people. But I think in the long run, owning a property is still great just due to the appreciation you're going to find. Like you look at people that bought into the Vancouver market or the Kelowna market 20, 30 years ago, they are so up on the property that they bought, not just in the equity they got from putting money down. They've gained so much money in appreciation just due to inflation and the value of stuff going up. So I feel like if a young person can rent to own or just save some money by renting, they should still try to put a down payment, and eventually, hopefully, they'll make money in the long run over 20, 30 years.
You're 21 and already you're in a rent-to-own program.
Yeah, the program was done by a developer just due to the fact that not a lot of stuff is selling right now just because it's so high. So you had to put 4% down, and then over 3 years you get, I think it's about 20% of the mortgage of the first 5 years. So I guess 20% of the first 5 years you get that equity, and then you also get the appreciation of the property's value. So say in 5 more years, if the property's gained $100,000, you get 50% of that with the developer to put towards a down payment.
Yeah, I've heard of some of those projects as well in Vancouver. Tom, really great to hear from you and hear your plans as a 21-year-old. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Tom in Kelowna. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Should we be seeing more of these rent-to-own programs, Jessica?
I think it's that's really interesting. And wow, yeah, so responsible for 21. I certainly was not thinking like that.
Not
21.
me, no.
Not me. That's well done him. I think, there are so many different options for everybody. And like I say all the time, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but personal finance is personal. So sometimes renting is the best option for you, or it could be the best option for you right now. Finding a rent to own program, that could be a good option, or maybe just, sticking it out, saving up that down payment and buying something. It really depends because, I honestly thought I would be a long-term renter, and it was until my 30s that it made sense to finally purchase a property. And overall, I do love home ownership, but it is complicated. It was a lot simpler renting, that's for sure. So I think there's a right path for everybody.
Personal finance is personal. Yeah, I love that. Do you find then there are generational lines along which these ideas fall?
Yeah, I think it's because, especially when we do think of, older generations, when it came to just investing, it was a little bit more complex. Whereas now, anyone can open up an investment account and get started right away within seconds on their phone. Back in the day, you would have find an advisor and it was, a little bit more costly. It just wasn't as accessible as it was today. So I think that's why a lot of people in those older generations look to home ownership, because first, it was a tangible asset. It made sense. Their parents did the same thing and it worked out really well for them. And it was accessible because housing was a lot cheaper back then. My parents were able to buy a home in Port Coquitlam, mind you, when they were in their mid-20s on one income. That's impossible now.
Wow.
And so the game was different back then. Now we have to kind of look at what's going on now, what's feasible and not feasible. And also, I think our wants are different. We are, millennials, Gen Z are less about ownership and more about experiences or, subscriptions or just temporarily accessing something, but I don't need to buy it to enjoy it. So I think our needs are definitely different.
I'm sure even Port Coquitlam now, there would be some...
Oh, I don't think I could afford Port Coquitlam.
No. We have an email here from David who writes, as a long-term renter, I find that BC and Canadian politicians frequently refer to the dream of home ownership as if everyone wants to or will have the ability to own a home. In my view, this is a misplaced priority and partially resulted in the current housing crisis across Canada. Some politicians seem to imagine that renting is simply a phase of life, such as being a student, and they ignore the reality that in the current housing situation, many people are renting for life. Rental housing provision for working class folks, for seniors, and for students has been a clear market failure in our cities. David, thank you very much for that point on our email. Bonnie is calling us now from Nelson. Hi, Bonnie.
Oh, hi. Hello. The only reason I have a beautiful house in Nelson is because I had a farm to sell. I've always rented all my life, and we used to live, before I moved to the Kootenays with my late husband, I lived in communes all the time. And I think that the reason that we have so few rental housing now, I have lots of friends in the rental business, it's because way back when we had a lot of rental housing, when I first came to the Spokane Valley, we rented a place. It was amazing. As they started the builders started to find out about building condos. And with renting, they had responsibilities to take care of the place. With condos, they could get in, get out, and leave town. And I really do believe that pushed all the rental housing that was going to be built, plus the fact that the federal government stopped putting money into social housing. All those kind of things came together.
Yeah,
it created a dearth of rental housing now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Bonnie.
I always rented.
Yeah, thank you so much for the call.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, the rise of the condos as well. There seems to be that one kind of housing that's been built for a long time, right? John is our last caller on this in Squamish. Hi, John. Your thoughts on renting versus owning? Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I was just going to say, your guest there was saying something about if you're a homeowner, you got to figure out, like the utilities and taxes and all that. But a landlord, when he's figuring out, what he's going to charge for his rental unit, he's figuring out, okay, I got so much mortgage payment, I got so much taxes every year, I got so much utilities every year, plus I need a little bit of a amount in there in case we have to replace appliances or anything. Plus,
so that
of
all
course,
goes.
That all goes into the cost of the price of the rental.
Yeah.
How much you're going to pay in rent.
Yeah, great point,
Not
John.
only that, but he's going to want to make a little bit of profit on it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm just going to jump in here because that's a really good point. I want to put that to Jessica in our last minute here. Thanks, John.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to think about that those costs are factored into the rent. However, still, we've got to also take a look at, if I were to rent this, basement suite or apartment, what's the cost? If I were to buy a unit myself right now, would the cost be comparable? And sometimes it's not, sometimes it's still cheaper to rent. And depending on, how long that landlord has had the rental, maybe it's been decades, they may have no mortgage at all. And so that's why they can offer maybe lower rent compared to someone who just bought the property and just put it up for rent. So there's some things to consider, but that's a very good point.
I know you talked about an emergency fund for homeowners. I just have about 30 seconds. Your advice then to people who want to rent, then what should they do to build that wealth?
Oh, invest. I think there was a guest who just talked about, having that diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds. I am all about that. I think that's a great strategy. Optimize your TFSA, your RRSP, and FHSA, even if you're not going to purchase, because there's some great benefits of using that FHSA if you're eligible.
Really great to speak to you. Thank you so much, Jessica. It's such an interesting discussion.
Absolutely.
Jessica Moorhouse, she's the author of Everything But the Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. And she also hosts the More Money podcast. Love to hear from you in the email, bctoday@cbc.ca.